Great. So I think we're going to get started this afternoon. So I wanted to let everybody know we're recording this session. So after today's session, we'll be posting it online so folks can share in the learnings from today's session. And then we'll continue to let folks join as they come on. And if you have a question, please post it in the comments section. And we're hopefully going to have about 15, 20 minutes at the end of today's session to field a few of your questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Darin Johnson, and I'm the founding CEO and artistic director of the American Theater for Puppetry Arts. And I'm also the curator of the special exhibit at the Museum of Broadway called The Craft of Broadway Puppetry that is on display officially through October, but I think it's going to be on up until the holidays. The exhibit not only looks at how puppets are built and designed for the Broadway stage, but it also celebrates the rich history of puppetry on Broadway. Through researching this exhibition, we've actually found that there's been about 123 Broadway shows that have either included or featured puppetry since 1919, which is around the first puppet show on Broadway, which was a Tony Sarg marionette show. I want to thank everybody for joining us on today's Zoom, and I'm really excited to introduce not only our speaker, but my co-moderator. So let's get started. For 35 years, Michael Curry has been a leader in entertainment and theater around the world, creating some of the most iconic forms of puppetry, set design, and spectacle. His work seamlessly blends traditional puppetry and theatrical techniques with innovation and cutting-edge technology to create the world's most exemplary entertainment experiences. Most notably, Michael Curry co-designed with Julie Taymor the puppets and masks for the Disney's Lion King, which garnered the Tony for Best Musical and celebrates its 30th year on Broadway next November 2027. Michael and his design team continue to support 9 productions of The Lion King that are happening around the world. In addition to The Lion King, Michael and his team have built and designed puppets for Broadway productions, including Frozen, Beetlejuice, Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Young Frankenstein, and Spamalot. And his company has built for the Walt Disney Company, Universal Studios, the Metropolitan Opera, Cirque du Soleil, the International Olympic Committee, the NFL, and Wynn Resorts, where he most recently served as producer and character designer for its spectacle production, Awakening. Also joining us as my co-moderator is Tom Schumacher, a Tony Award-winning producer and creative executive who has spent more than 4 decades bringing epic stories to life through animation, film, and the Broadway stage. For more than 2 decades, Tom served as president and producer of Disney Theatrical Group, where he oversaw the development and global expansion of Disney's stage productions, including Broadway musicals Aida, Aladdin, Frozen, Hercules, Mary Poppins, Newsies, Tarzan, and of course, The Lion King, for which Tom was an original producer of both the animated motion picture and the Broadway production. And Tom's a leader in the theater community. He served as chairman of the Broadway League, a member of the Tony Administration Committee for 28 seasons, co-chair of the Jimmy Awards, and is also a member of My American Theater for Puppetry Arts. We are incredibly honored to have you with us today, and I'm humbled to call both of you colleagues and friends. As I said before, our plan is to save the last 20 minutes for Q&A. So if you have questions, please post them to the comments section. So Tom, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yeah, Michael, we were talking before everyone got online. We spent a lot of time together, really in close quarters, a long, long time ago. I'm curious, and I think everyone's wondering this because I was just looking at all the people from around the world that are on with us today. And, I Peter Sellers, the great director, and I became pals over the fact that we both did crummy little puppet shows when we were kids and then became obsessed. And I'm sure there's a lot of people online who have been obsessed with this forever. But you went to college as a fine artist to be a sculptor. And how did this happen? How did you convert over from going to art school to being literally the most recognized person who does what you do on the globe?
Well, art in its purest form and puppetry are intrinsically intertwined. They are, and you frankly, to be a good designer and a good builder and a performer, you have to understand composition and art. But how that happened, Tom, was I also was very kinetic. I was a hyperactive child who was a wrestler, a martial artist, and I moved all the time. And sculpture just sat there. And so I think, embraced sculpture that moved as a method for me to find a satisfaction in making creativity. So my first sculptures were floating in bodies of water.
So you were doing kinetic sculpture.
Yes, yes, that's it. And frankly, others saw them and said, these belong on stage. It was not my idea.
Who did that?
John Napier, most notably, arguably the world's most popular designer in theater in the 80s and 90s, he saw a sculpture I had at the Greenwich Village Halloween parade, Ralph Lee's old parade. And I was kind of discovered that night, Tom. He said, I love those wings. It was a big winged creature. It was a puppet, but it was more of a sort of a walking sculpture, like I'm often accused of doing. And he invited me to work on a little show called the Siegfried and Roy Show. And frankly, I didn't know anything about them or theater.
When they were launching in Vegas, you were.
Yeah.
Ah.
So I went to their studio the next day, saw a bunch of diagrams and models that designers were making, and I knew how to do all of that. I grew up a maker and a builder, and that's really the right place at the right time for me. I was in the galleries in the Lower East Side and trying to make a living, and it was my outreach of my playthings, my playtime, really. Those moving sculptures were not my serious work. But since then, I discovered that you can play for a living.
Ain't that the truth?
You can play for a living.
That's fantastic.
So I would recommend, I've got to say, I would recommend good fine art chops with everybody. Everybody should, on this call, should learn to draw, or at least learn what composition is. And by that, that means layout. That's a lot of things. It's a heavy word, composition, but without it, you really won't be able to stay in the room with the best of them.
I'm curious, Michael, as a child, was puppetry even on your radar screen, or did you have any memories of puppetry growing up?
No.
Okay.
Maybe some nightmares that resemble that. But no, I was raised in a logging community that was religious and didn't allow television or books, even that far away from actual cultural input. So I would rather have had that, Darin, but I did not.
Okay. And so I'm curious, let's kind of jump into the Broadway world. And so can you talk a little bit about how you ended up getting connected with Julie Taymor?
Yes. That era where I started making sculptures move, I heard about this cool lady downtown who was she was strapping skeletons to bodies and making them move. And I was doing the same thing in Brooklyn, literally the same thing in Brooklyn. And in those days, her name was in the phone book. I called her up, and I'll show you in a few minutes what I showed her. I didn't really have any work, but I caught her at the right time in her career too, where she needed a clever sidekick. If you will, a technical valet who was also an artist. And so I started work with her the next day on a movie called Fool's Fire that you really should see. It's a great puppet movie, the very first film ever shot in high definition, done in the, when did we do it?
Fool's Fire was your first piece with her.
Yes, it was. Yes, and she was
What year?
starting
What
work
year?
on
Was, yeah, yeah.
that
What
was
year was
'88,
that?
I think, and she was
Yeah.
starting work on it the next day and had no art director. And it was either desperate or just provenance, but that's how we started the next day.
Wow.
I think people imagine these things are so planned, and oftentimes they fall into, they fall into place. I met Julie um, when she was just after she completed Liberty's Taken, and that was like sort of 1985, and I was trying to bring her to Los Angeles for the 1987 Los Angeles Festival, and then 10 years later, you went to the phone book. I went through an old Rolodex, the classic round Rolodex, and pulled the card out from 10 years earlier and called her. And I said, we're thinking about doing this Lion King thing on stage, and she said, "What's the Lion King?" It was the biggest movie in the world, right? But at the time, and she really didn't know what it was. But you actually were working on the Lion King in a way before I even talked to Julie,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
didn't you do the parade in California?
Yes, we do. We did the Lion King celebration parade in 1994. So yeah, we had 2 years, and in fact, it horrified Julie when she saw the work we did there because we just did carbon copies of the feature animation. In those days, we were trying to make it really look like the film. And so with Julie, her starting point was going to be, how are we going to transcend that look and find this new aesthetic? So yeah, this is the years early. This photograph you're seeing is, we set up a studio on 23rd Street where first I just needed a place to make models. And then the scenic designer came by, the costume designer came by and said, "This is our clubhouse." And so everybody moved in and we really blasted out. It was the most cooperative show I've ever worked on. It
Well, I was going
really,
to ask you about that
yeah.
because I remember this space. So there's our beloved Mary Peterson there, who's the costume associate. I mean, it's so sweet to think about this space. But you were now working with someone, Julie, Julie Taymor, you'd worked with before, but she, in her own right, is a really accomplished sculptor and had been also dealing with puppets. But so I had said to her, "I don't think this should look like the movie." And out of, I was there when you launched the parade. I mean, I did the movie and everything, and we were all so excited. But I knew that theatrically we couldn't go down that same path, which was the first conversation I had with Julie. She said, "Do you expect this to look like the movie?" And I said, "No, it can't. It can't look like that. You have to free yourself from that. I mean, we want to follow the same story, but we have to free ourselves to use the language of the theater." But so can you talk, because there were things that you threw out on the floor, she threw out on the floor. There was so much, as you're saying. Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, this is where I really got to lean into my fine arts background. I went through African art. I wanted to find our way in through homage to African art. And that was one thing, with respect, Tom. The movie didn't spend much time, actually. It had a stylistic palette that was that. So Julie and I went to the Metropolitan Museum. We went to exhibits. We started studying it from the inside out from African art, which doesn't have a huge history of puppetry, but a huge mask tradition
Yeah.
and animal character performance. So, and it turned out to be a good instinct because those lessons, that aesthetic driven by the natural forms and frankly, the 600-year history. Look at African art when it intersected Picasso or Matisse, or it's really sophisticated. So in a
Well,
way,
yeah.
that's where we came at it. And Julie, really, she's adopted ethnic, in the most positive way, ethnic attributes from her Indonesian work, her Japanese work. I've worked all over the world with Julie. She's a chameleon that takes real care with the authenticity of it. So, and then she fell in love with our African musicians, and that just
Yeah.
sealed the deal. We were going to go African, and I would say that's the thing that there's a great deal of reference that you can find that's legitimate reference of our masks. I could take you through many of the choices we made that were homages. I don't call them copies. They were homages, and then incorporating the Broadway tradition.
Sure. Well, when you think about it, Richard Hudson was born in Zimbabwe and was raised there, so he grew up around this, and of course what Michael Ward did with the makeup also was so closely tied to what you and Julie did with puppets and masks, and it was completely an intentional dive in. In terms of the puppets, there's one that I think it's this puppet, this creation, this kinetic thing that I'm going to talk about, ask you to talk about, is the whole show pivots off of it, because when we talk about the fact that the show does not look like the movie, although there are heavy references. Timon and Pumbaa very much reflect what they are in the movie, right? You absolutely get that, particularly those two characters, and that's the whole point, is to celebrate that. But when Michael Eisner, the then chairman of the studio, asked me, and you were around Michael all the time, it's hard to imagine how many chairmen of a major entertainment company would just hang around the theater during tech and pop. I mean, he celebrated this so much. It was astounding. But the single piece that made him say yes was the gazelle wheel.
Yeah, yeah.
And can you talk about how this works? When Julie showed this to him, she said, and I quote, we were at the Disney Institute in Florida, and she said, if you get this, I'm your person. We should do this show together. And if this doesn't make any sense to you, you don't want me and I don't want to do it. And Michael got it in one. Can you talk about what this is and where it came from?
Yes, well, it came literally from the notion of the circle of life, and pivot's a good word to use, because we used, I wanted to do Julie and I both landed on this idea of what is circular in design. What can show a beginning, middle, and end? What is the Ouroboros of this thought? And so we knew we had this beautiful introduction of the grasslands. And if in every case we introduced animals, it was in a circular form. We had the anthill that rotates. We had the buzzard pole, which rotates. The gazelle wheel, which is, used to show the beautiful gazelles, and then used to show the horror of the desiccation by showing skeletons later in the show. A good tip for people: reuse puppets with a new face. It's always popular. But this idea was, we knew we had to strip clean all the artifice of effects and things and keep it human and keep it kind of authentic. So we showed all the mechanics. Julie and I both have always enjoyed showing the craft of puppetry. We hardly ever hide the puppeteers. We often use dancers because it's even more related to a thematic storytelling, because the body can tell the story in conjunction with a puppet. But the gazelle wheel, we didn't even show that slick model, Tom. I did a little cardboard
guide. Yeah, we have that. Yeah, it's extraordinary.
It was done like the day before, and Julie, God bless her, has the courage to say, if you get this little model, and he did. So models, look, I'm going to give you tips along the way. Make models. They're worth 1,000 3D renderings, and you can hold them and you put them in your client's hand, and the job's yours.
Yeah, there is nothing like seeing things, and you understand scale in a way, but there's also something, Michael, I would think you would agree that there's an enchantment to when you get a model, because it's a toy. Yeah. And a toy returns even the most severe executive ever, when you hand them a little toy, they somehow understand it, because it's and scale, it seems so sweet and kind of vulnerable. You had to build a team. We had the team that was building the show, we had the team that was running the show, but you had to manufacture, because your shop manufactured every single thing that was on the stage that was a puppet or a mask, right? I mean, at that time.
Yes, at that time, yes.
Yeah. And can you talk about, because I think how some of that stuff changed over time as we learned about new materials, weight. People ask me all the time about, like the weight of some of those masks, and some of the, like microphones are now heavier than some of those masks that they're wearing inside the mask. But that's because materials have changed. You've stayed so on top of that.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a designer and a builder because of material sciences and the advantages now of how one can present. Look, this in 1994, we started the Lion King in a sketchbook, and you can literally see us sort of forming Mufasa right over. It's a fucking lion there, and I'm just making him into a. And then we got right into clay. We used potter's clay, Julie and I, and right away getting into it. But yes, there's a big team you need to do this kind of thing because it's design and making are really, unfortunately, considered separate. And in my world, they're not. I actually believe that designers, their hands and their mind are connected, and they should have a certain modicum of skills so at least they can prototype and feel their way through an idea. My world has always been evenly blended between design and fabrication, and it's where I live. So I'm one of the few designers that own their own fabrication company because it works for me. I don't know, it's hard. Sure, it's hard, but it works so seamlessly. It's like having your surgeon, be your nurse. You're not going to have any problems. It's a complete circle, and Tom, producers have liked that over the years because they can kind of go worry free because they don't have to do a lot of connecting. And so I set up the Lion King was see what I had to do with the Lion King now is start talking about supporting a show.
Yeah.
Making, my clever builders aren't that happy with, punching in and making the same Mufasa mask for 30 years. So it's important in commercial theater. You have to know that you would want to support a show, to put all that time and really to make it careful and good. It's a long-term investment. We've been fortunate because we've had decades-long shows.
Yeah.
But building a team, like people usually go out and hire another artist right away. No, hire a manager first and do the art yourself. Hire a manager who's going to do the protocol in your day-to-day and pay your bills and help you and remind you when you're spending too much, and do the artwork yourself early on. And the third person, the next person you hire couldn't be an artist, but people make the mistake of surrounding themselves with other good artists and they don't get anything done. So my business has always been pretty legit. I know it's a business that I want to do my whole career. So I always tell people are surprised to hear this. Find friends of yours who are really organized, who can book airplane tickets, who can do that. Find that person, and they usually love the world of theater, and they usually are very satisfied with helping you in that manner. Other artists, they're going to be a little less cooperative, maybe even competitive. So it's a backwards order that I suggest you follow. And it's not just because I'm a commercial artist. I work with all kinds of downtown artists. We are still very connected to the makers world and the small puppetry world. And I tell them the same thing. And those that do it are often glad. So, and everybody's got friends with full-time jobs who wouldn't mind throwing in and helping you manage. That's a piece of advice I give to all emerging and successful makers.
And Michael, so as your shop, and before we jump into Frozen, as your shop supports all of these productions of Lion King all over the world, and the show's now been up for 30 years, like obviously innovation and technology has happened in terms of materials and weight and types of things. So how have you been able to evolve the designs and builds for the Lion King over the last 30 years?
Yes, we used to make plaster head casts for all of our principal leads to build their masks on, and suffocating experience for if you've all probably done it. Now we scan and we carve a cork head made out of cork that you can pin into, and for the African ladies that have hair extensions, we mold in the wig cap. So now we can make headliners. We invented, under Tom's great support, back when we had Imagineering working with us, we invented a headliner that's a crank down headliner. And many of you have seen it. We kind of invented it on the Lion King. And we've adapted that now to a new version that uses 3D printing in 3 sizes. Actors' heads these days seem to be changing shape. I don't know what's going on, but and so that's where 3D scanning, even our old mask, the old Mufasa mask that comes together, the big one, we had molds of it, but we didn't have a scan of how it sits in space. So now with just, iPhone technology, we can scan and in retrospect have a digital file of our world, which always helps the longevity of a show when you document it well. And I came in with carbon fiber that was really space age light when we built the Lion King. So we haven't saved that much weight because nobody can still build lighter than we can. We can talk about that a little bit. I urge you all to experiment with today's composite technologies are pretty amazing for builders. And there's a lot out there in the sports industry. You see it all the time, and it's a real thing. It really can help your work, help your performances, because things that are light move better, and they have
Yeah.
less. They
I mean,
have less
I mean, you'll
weight
remember
loss.
though,
Yeah.
Michael, like when I think about very brave people, and I'm still, I just saw Heather the other day, and Heather Headley, who was the original Nala, and Aubrey Lynch just spent a weekend at my house, who was in the original company, and then ran 10 companies around the world. And everyone learned, Robbie had so much hair in those days and how it all works. And I think about Dear John Vickery, the original Scar, because that was a learning journey to figure out how, at first, can you talk about that? Because at first you thought maybe you could do it on almost a balance thing, and then we have the motor. And can you talk about how Scar works and what we've learned over the years?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty elaborate for the actor.
It is for him because we always hire actors first, and actors make great puppeteers because they know what story you're telling with the puppet, and that's key. Your actors have to know that. Your puppeteers have to know that. Vickery was our guinea pig. That mask comes down in front. Tom let us spend a lot of money doing animatronic masks. We did a Mufasa and a Scar that their mouths move when you spoke, and it was so awful. It was
It was
so
terrible.
awful that we knew immediately we're going with a static mask. It just so competed with the actor. But in that case, we finally motorized it with a small servo motor on the belt, and we drove up cables up through both Mufasa and Scar's head, and there's two pivots, two pulleys up there, and they have a little finger slider on their ring finger on the right hand that they can move the mask up and down electronically. The whole thing weighs just ounces, and that part has gotten really, really good with the advent of new servo motors and technology.
Yeah.
And we're working on a wireless version now because the motors are so small. We'll put it right in the head instead of driving it from the hip.
Yeah, I think about all these wonderful people, Sam Wright, the original Mufasa, who had this storied career. He was he was famous on Broadway, and he was so honored to be in it and to be figuring out how to do all of that stuff. All those original people were pretty something. Did you want to switch over, Darin, to Frozen a little bit?
Yeah, let's talk about Frozen.
Um, Obviously, people who have seen Frozen. Do you have Olaf up? Can you put Olaf
Yeah,
up?
yep.
Yeah, because it's just worth, because for me, Olaf, we knew we had to have in the show, and you know, yeah, that would be what people would like Olaf to be able to do. and, and, you know, um, there's dear Greg and playing Olaf, and Olaf is so adored. When we were in Denver, some lady said, "This is Greg Hildreth, and he plays Olaf," and the little boy says, well, how does he fit inside it? He actually hadn't seen that Greg was standing there for 2/3 of the show.
Yeah. It's really magic that people can focus. It's like a ventriloquist. You can focus your attention. There are times where we want you to see the actor's face, but most of the time we want it delivered by Olaf itself. Here's an important thing to say. And you said it earlier, Tom, that Zazu, Timon, and Pumbaa look like the animated features. And so does Olaf, because here's the rule. You can't change comic characters. You can change all the serious dramatic characters all you want. You can get fancy and artistic, but we tried so many times to change these characters, either their scale or their method, and the more you stay on model with comic characters, the more beloved they are. And I've seen, this isn't just Disney, this is my rule now for everything. And pay attention to that comment and look at puppetry across the world, and you'll find that comic characters, they're already good enough. It's a weird thing. So Olaf, we tried to really move like Olaf, and he has little dinky arms and he's small. So we knew that the actor would overpower him. So we found a really good balance in costuming.
And he's beautiful. There was that drawing in that thing for seeing a full scale human inside it, and it's just not as charming. But in a sense, how else would you do it, right? We talked about it, and there's only so many choices. I think one of the greatest triumphs in the history of Disney theatrical is what you did with Sven for Frozen. And the reason I say that is because we said very serious conversations that we should cut the character.
Yeah.
And you're the one who fought for it. And we were like, and I thought, I don't want to see the version with the head sticking out for this character, because it doesn't have dialogue. It doesn't, and Sven has a fantastic attitude. He has to have scale or you don't get the reindeer effect. He's beloved in the movie, but not essential to the plot, right? And so there was a long conversation of, would we hate ourselves if we didn't have it? And I as the puppet guy in the room, because my puppet geek childhood, and put myself through college as a puppeteer, which is really annoying to have a producer who has done all this. But I thought, well, we can't do it. And you fought for him. You somehow knew, and you said, just let me try. Yeah. And it's the most spectacular effect ever. I just love this so much.
This is an important thing that I discovered. I fought for it because I had a gut feeling about this, is that Christoph and Anna had to develop chemistry and fall in love on a Broadway stage. And you had to believe it, right? And Michael Grandage, the director, thought a puppet would get in the way of that, two-person love scene. And I said, no, I have to counter. Sven will be the thing that tells the audience they're in love. And Sven will be the counterpart. He'll be the subtext. And sure enough, the audience, Sven makes gestures. He pushes, and he also gives credence to this man of the woods. Like Christoph's supposed to be this, rustic guy, came from the trolls, and the animal, the beast with him, gave him that domain. But the biggest thing was, and I said that if he gets in the way, he'll just graze. He'll put his head down and eat some grass, and he'll go away completely, and he did. And we're really proud of it, because we kept talk about that comment about man in a suit, because Bob Iger at the opening asked me if it was an animal in a costume. And so it was.
We got a lot of that. A lot of people said, some mom said to her kid, he said, is that a real reindeer? She says, no, honey, that's a real reindeer in a costume. What do people, how much poo do people think we have backstage on this show? But I mean, can we show do you have that little?
You have the dressing video, because it's very few people on earth could actually perform this. It takes a real physical skill.
That's that great entrance when people go crazy for him.
Yeah, so here we
go. This is him this is the dismantling. There's dear Andrew Ferozzi getting dressed. This is so athletic. And we've had men and women doing this all over.
Yeah, we have. Some of the women are the better performers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael, can you talk a little bit about what went into designing this and making it so a performer could be in this large puppet costume for that long of a time on stage?
Yeah, well, you start with exercises on real performers. In this case, I could blueprint it out, but it wouldn't work unless so we literally start in all cases I have a small workshop where we have people in cardboard and hot glue, just like you should. We build it up and found it. We found it we work with a local dance company that's another tip I would give you. Befriend a local dance company, and you'll have all the great performers you need, and they'll love it. And then we built it that way. And the whole rule was to make it able to be done by an ensemble performer. We quickly realized, and this is what I had to fight for, is that it's going to be a specialized performer. And because of the arm strength, and the head is I think it's very clever. It has a 4 linkage connection. So when I move my head, it connects to my shoulders. and I can do 8 things with the head based on coordination with my shoulders, and then they're cross-linked, so it's intuitive. When I go this way, it goes that way, and it's the things you learn through experience and also this prototype experience. So, and then it's built in the most specialized carbon fiber, titanium, and aircraft aluminum, and anything that's not doesn't have a function isn't in there. The fiber is all it's bubble silk, so it's a very lightweight silk. We never use fur ever. So we always make our animal coatings with non-flammable fabrics, and so we always find that when you build things to look theatrical instead of trying to copy nature like taxidermy, you always get more expression. So Sven was a pretty good exercise in all of those things. He's really light. He only weighs the whole thing 22 pounds, and the head is really super lightweight. I'm really proud of that, Tom.
It is just spectacular. By the way, if you want to see this over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, you can go to the howdoestheshowgoon.com, because I have it in the book. I have your video implanted in the book, because I just think it knocks me out, because it uses every piece of really the magic of the theater, starting with its conception to the performer and the tool you give the performer to use. It's just magical. And when I love watching the actors who play Kristoff, dear Jelani Aladdin, who had to also learn how to navigate, because you have to be careful about the antlers, and so it actually, you feel the danger of it on stage. And those performers who have done it, starting with Andrew, it's just brilliant, unbelievably. I just think I never get enough of it. Never get enough of it.
So, Michael, why don't we jump now to Beetlejuice, which opened up at the Winter Garden in 2019. And here you were, you keep getting tapped to work on these iconic films that have iconic characters. And so talk to us a little bit about your involvement with Beetlejuice and kind of the idea of incorporating puppetry, not just for a few characters, but this was really a sense of incorporating puppetry as an illusion throughout the entire production. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Beetlejuice, the theme is about magic and this supernatural world. And so it was really fun. Plus, we had one of the world's greatest comedic directors, Alex Timbers, doing it. He really knows how to deliver comedy. And so we knew we would have to deliver on the sandworm and all the epic things. And we did. There are certain buttons that you have to push in a show like this. And keep in mind that half the audience came dressed as characters. This has a beloved cult following. Yes. This is like doing Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that. It has a following. And I love the aesthetic because it had a kind of crappy, undercrafted aesthetic, which you had to honor, and that's an important thing to say, when something should look sophisticated or when it should look rough around the edges. And so we wanted it to look like those bad stop motion animations, albeit really big. So in this case, this is the sandworm. We do a lot of what we call structural puppetry. We do a lot of body puppetry, a lot of handheld puppetry. In this case, a lot of our big things are on wheelbases, and it's a great way to know puppetry techniques but still understand big engineering. So this is my brother Jeff Curry. We grew up making, I didn't grow up with puppets, but we made a lot of shit, spaceships and all kinds of stuff. So there's Jeff writing the sandworm. So this would be a person inside using all counterweights. We try to do things as much with traditional methods as possible, not involve electrics. And this, of course, was hidden. It came from off stage in a nice cover. Let's go to the next. We did 4 sandworms in the show. This one's a big cantilevered one that's on it's like a counterweighted crane. It's the easiest thing to do. We do versions of this where you have a human body. There's one behind it in the picture that a human body goes on the end of the stick. It's a great technique for levitation. Oh. And you can still, with levers, push, pulls, you can get all this great stuff. That whole thing probably weighs 12 pounds. It's all pattern drafted orthopedic foam and an inflatable body. Passive inflation is a great way to get big forms. Okay, next. Wow. The sandworm here the shrimp face, we call it. It's a third arm puppet oldest trick in the book. The real hand's inside the shrimp. And of course, it grabs the face at the dinner party. The third arm puppet, I never get tired of it. We use it constantly. In the tour, they wanted a non-puppeteered pig. So this is just something we did for South Korea and Australia. That's a motorized pig, and it's just a counterweight that's being thrown around by a rotary motor. It's funny. And the next is the thing I do a lot. In fact, I did for the Siegfried and Roy show, most famously, the Puppet Army. This is where you have a puppeteer in the middle that is carrying the cross support bars, very lightweight. It's easy with the shoulder pads of the football player to make it light, and it's you're manipulating the arms and the legs. It's an old French circus technique from the 1700s. And the next is just showing you the range of movement. It was during in the netherworld where they're seeing all these dead people that are performing. It's quite a fun bit. And then I'll show you a couple pieces that didn't make it into the show, and this happens with puppetry. We had a bear and an elk that were on the wall, but we just got so tight, so cramped in the Broadway stage that they got cut from the show. They're living in a warehouse somewhere, but they were quite good puppets. They were scary. So it automatically, quickly in an illusion, became a skeleton elk, and a bear as well.
And then, Michael, are those mechanical?
No, it's all puppetry, all lever driven.
Wow!
I should show here you can see me. I think I poke out from my hide here. There I am.
Oh yeah! Wow.
Yeah. So look, you can't really build or design without being a pretty good puppeteer, and you can't even be a good producer without being a good puppeteer, right, Tom?
Yeah, I'm not so sure.
Look, the last. Do you have those drawings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just talk about that, because this was an important factor in my early work. This is we do mechanical drawings. I bridge the gap between analog and digital work. My 15 years before things became digital were analog. I used to fax drawings to New York, and if I had a fax machine, we used to post them in the mail, and we didn't have cell phones. So we used to draw things, and it is a great way to visualize what your future will be. So scroll through these. I'll just talk about them. These are what my drawings look like today, because they're all done in CAD. But we still sketch everything in a real raw way, and it goes up through the evolution of getting to this point. Go to the next one. Then we do color blocking, and we start doing animation studies, and all those sticks are feathers that will move, and we'll go through all the motion well before we build anything. The next slide. This is what I did before I had a company. I went to Robert Lepage, Julie Taymor, William Friedkin, some pretty fancy people with drawings of what I wanted to do in the future. And they go, now hold it, I don't understand. What have you done? And I said, I showed them sculptures and paintings. But this really worked. And these drawings, this was done in the 84, maybe 85. Go to the next one. This is still what my stuff looks like today. And it truly was a precognition of what I wanted to do. All my friends were going to film and TV props and special effects, because that was going to be the future. And I knew that was going to not have a long future. So I avoided Hollywood special effects and stayed with live performance. And this is kind of how I formed my attachment with creatures. I imagined a world of creatures and how they intersected with humans. And I was as interested in sculpture as I was puppetry performance. But if you'll notice, all these drawings are built around a human body. So soon enough, my sculptures started aligning with performers, which now is the most important factor. The most important thing is not sculpture, and it's not making. It's the performance. And why we do it, working backwards from what you want the audience to see on stage. That's the other advice I give people. Learn to think backwards. Visualize it, what you want on stage, what you want to actually think about, the review you want written about your piece. You want the audience's reaction, and it tells you something about working backwards, upstream, if you will, about what you need to do in the next step is design. You got to design to support that performance. And then when you're building, you've got to support the design, which is in service to the performance. So the one thing we do in our work is talk to all the builders about the importance of understanding the story and the performance that they're there to tell. The very concept that the performance is around. And I don't have a sculptor or a painter or a welder who can't recite back the intent of the director and the intent of the story. So, it seems simple, but you'll see you and yourselves and your others losing sight of that, and the work won't be as good.
And Michael, speaking about directors, so I've talked to a couple of puppet designers and builders who have told me stories where, unfortunately, a director brings them in at the 11th hour to work on a show because they feel like they need a one-off puppet, right? And so what advice, if young directors, theater directors were listening to this conversation, like what advice would you give a director who is working on a show, whether it's a revival or a new show, that's thinking about puppetry? Like, what advice would you give that director about how they should approach and think about puppetry?
Yeah. I would either give the responsibility to the scenic designer for that director to put it under their domain, and then they'll take it seriously and give it the sort of quarter and the what it needs. And then the choreographer would be the next person I put in direct responsibility for solving this puppetry dilemma they have. And yes, it happens a lot. Puppetry is a good way to solve problems. Geez, Tom, remember those scene changes? We just did we threw up shadow puppets and we got another 90 seconds to change scenery.
Well, and we needed those, but we needed them because they were so tight. I do think it's interesting, and it shouldn't go without saying, and always said, audiences in everything feel the human touch. And, when you go to the theater, you want to, there's something, because it's live, they feel that human touch. But even when you're talking about in film, when you get asked to do stuff, there's something different when it's practical versus, and today I do fear, kind of cranking out suitable for consumption AI animation. Life feels different when Andreas Deja is drawing Scar, and he creates the entire performance is this man, and it goes through every character feeling that, and that notion of not just handmade, but the spirit that is inside it, I think is fascinating. The Star Wars fans have had lots of thoughts about CG characters versus where George started with it, and also there's something magical about just in a show seeing a puppet, right? There's something so primal that we have shared with earliest humans who would narrate with some object, some talisman, something. But I would also say that it feels wrong when it is not of a unity. They need to feel conceived together. They need to feel unified. They need to feel like they're of, and when you talk about the designer, the set designer, they need to feel of a cloth. They're not just randomly tossed in. And I have so many puppeteers that I'm crazy about, and people that I knew and people that I've worked for. And their stuff looks altogether different, which is fun for Darin's exhibit at the museum. You and I have both been there. But that's not what you want to see in a show, right? You want to see this unity of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get accused of not having a style. What's your style? I'm artists are storytellers, and so the more successful my storytelling can be, and that has to adopt, as you say, it has to be the same fabric. And I think there's something that'll never go away about a live presentation, and the idea of play. We said it at the top of this talk. Everybody understands. If you look at my puppetry work, it's all for positive stuff. I'm not doing scary creatures or horror. So it's fun. I like the idea of serious play very much. And I think puppetry does that very well. So Darin, to answer your question specifically, you get this last minute 11th hour request by a director. You don't know them. They don't know you. Try to solve their problem and say, I'll solve your problem, but next time I want to be at the table at the beginning of the discussion. Yeah. And pretty soon you get to be part of a repeated team, which I've been fortunate to do with the Tamors and the Lepages and people, where you get to come in as the puppet designer the same day the composer comes in, the same day the writer comes in. And at the end of the day, they appreciate the perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Michael, we asked this, we did a panel last week with Rick Lyon and Basil Twist and James Ortiz, and we asked them, is there a piece of, and it's kind of a twofold question. What is, of all the puppetry that you've been involved in creating, kind of, do you have one that's your aha moment that you say, wow, this is the one I'm most proudest of? And then is there a piece of puppetry that you didn't do that you saw, whether it's, on a Broadway stage or at a circus or theme park or something that you didn't create, but boy, you thought it was a really wow moment?
Yeah. Anything by Philippe Genti is, I kind of go, I go crazy for. Japanese bunraku, the real thing, pretty impactful. Tom, when we were doing the Lion King over there in Osaka,
Oh yeah.
I visited, and then I was so cavalier about saying how they could fix their old ones. I got to go back and epoxy some of them together,
Yeah.
Wow.
400-year-old puppets, but
Wow.
their performances are at a different level and so complete within an art form. That was very impactful. My favorite puppet I've ever created, I like the one I have in the current show, Awakening. It's a giant earth puppet. It's 28 feet tall, and it takes 8 puppeteers. And then I like the cheetah from The Lion King on Broadway.
Hmm.
I think
That
yeah,
cheetah, that is the thing that makes everyone lean in. And Lana Gordon, who was the original cheetah, she was so beautiful with that. And she comes in from downstage right. People would gasp in those days, because now you've seen it in commercials or whatever. But
yeah,
and it's also so simple as her head turns,
yeah.
and that it's so yeah.
Look,
There's a
at the beginning, I wanted to put it over her head. We hadn't found this
yeah
whole world of hybrids, but
yeah. Nothing
but
comes without exploration.
well,
Nothing
in
comes
this
without
case,
yeah.
this is this dual thing that happens where we knew, and puppetry does this. If you're going to show puppeteers on stage, you probably should make a reference to them. The black bunraku works if you want them to go away, but the real sweet spot is finding a way that they work together, and that thing happens where you forget about the performer unless that performer wants you to remember them.
Yeah.
That's the performance.
I have a Jerry Mahoney and Knucklehead Smith from Paul Winchell that I have on my floor in my office, but I put pictures of Paul in their laps. So they're actually holding pictures of Paul Winchell because to me he's so attached to them.
Well, I got to say one thing about puppetry today. I think some of the best puppetry is being created in the cosplay community, and it's
Oh, that's
really,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's really supercharged the maker's world. And now they're all taking our IP, and they're being creative within that, but the craft of it and the crudeness, the stuff that they're, hardware store craft that is coming together in these beautifully formed things, it's pretty exciting. A bunch of mime makers do it, and that's kind of how I stay close to it. But it's a world that you can find a lot about materials and shortcuts and all kinds of things. In terms of just pure geeking out on making,
Yeah.
it's
And
a
but the making is important, right? The making is
yeah.
important. Do you have, that's interesting that this to learn how to make. I think we've sort of touched on a lot. I don't know, Darin wanted us to talk a little bit about advice for people who want to do this. And from in my world, everyone took a different path,
Mm.
and I don't know. Is there general kind of career advice for this? Because some people
Yeah.
go to art school, some people don't. Some people work for a master like um, and all these people. By the way, I want to touch on this. James Ortiz in Hail Mary. Here's a puppeteer who I've worked with as a puppeteer. He's a puppeteer who's performing his puppet in for real in real time in a movie. Who is eligible now? He will be eligible for an actor nomination. I don't expect it, but
Oh,
as an
he'll get the
member. But
nomination. Yeah,
yeah,
I hope.
because
Yes.
it's such a crazy world right now that to let that movie go back to that. But is there advice for people? Do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. You may not like to hear this, all you introverted artists, but you gotta network and push. You gotta get out there. You've got to get your work out there. And you have to get in groups that are much like critiques. I don't care where it is, a maker's club, a puppet, all the puppet fringe and puppet slams, get involved. It's sometimes really, it's hard on your ego to get in at that level. But so what I got in art school that you're not getting unless you did that kind of training, you don't get the heavy critique and your ability to defend your work verbally, your ability to pitch your work verbally, your ability to come to understand what the hell you're doing by explaining your work to others. And that's one of the easiest things you can do because he just takes one foot in front of the other. Try busking, get out there. Festivals and parades are all over the fucking place, and they all want stuff. Go to the dance companies, like I said. You got to be a positive networker and learn to pitch. Learn to pitch your ideas and then defend your ideas. And don't just go to easy people like your family. Go to hard people. And here's the other thing. Maybe it was just old-fashioned of me, but I used to call people Jules Fisher, the most venerable lighting designer in the world. Before he knew who I was, I called him and said, "Can we have lunch? I'm just a," and then we let people bring their work to my studio, and at lunchtime, people will come around. If you got the courage, put it on the table, and my people will come around and tell you what they think, and it invariably leads to development that's positive. And then sometimes my people help. So I volunteered a lot early on. I got out there, and like I said, I was discovered in a parade and set on a path for a very good career. It was really one night, so you just don't know when that night's going to be, but you want to be out there on that night.
There you have it.
Yeah. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about your workshop out in Oregon? And then maybe we could show the tour for the exhibition. Michael put together about a 6-minute video walking through his incredible workshop. But do you want to talk about it before we put up the video?
Well, I just wanted to say there's not much in the video because all of our stuff is so held by IP that you don't even see workers because everybody is either holding I can't say who they are, but we're always working for companies that that I can't ever show my work. It's a hell of a thing. I wish I would have done original work because then I could show it all. But let me show you the facility, and I'm very proud of it. We built it specifically for this.
Let's see.
I can't hear. Does this have audio, Darin?
Can you guys not hear the audio?
No.
Oh, because I can. I don't know what's going on. Let's try this again. Let's do. Can you hear it now?
No.
Nope. Yeah, I don't know what's happening.
It's okay. I can do it. I know just what that guy's going to say.
Okay, so I'll here we go.
So we built it it's in Oregon, where I'm from, and so we have 3 buildings done specifically for different things. The front of it looks like an architect's office. It has clean spaces, and we have purchasing agent, human resources. We have 60 people. My average employee's been with me 13 years. And another thing, get your team and keep them close. Because we have 30-year veterans so this is the main workroom, what we call crafts, and it has ancillary spaces that attach to mechanics and sculpture and painting. So, and it's kind of a warehouse building with color-corrected lighting, lots of natural light. Painting is a big, big deal for me. That's my background. I have a master's in art history, and painting is something that I believe is the finishing touch of any puppet. And I would urge you to find good painters if you don't learn to paint yourself. And using today's materials, the dyes, the paints, the fabrics, the materials today are just stunning. And then you'll see here a bunch of super lightweight things. We're doing a bunch of drone mounted puppetry now that takes super lightweight carbon fiber. You don't even weld our aluminum together. We build things out of water jet cut carbon fiber plates, using a lot of things from what is really the aerospace or the race boat industry. I'm a big fan. Then we also do pattern drafted orthopedic foam. Here's a dog we're creating for Toho in Japan. And we're designing a really cool mechanism whereby one puppeteer will get full leg motion and 7 different head and body motions with just 2 hands. And we're using an actor who speaks the lines. Going back into sculpture now, we have been making these great Transformer characters for Universal for over 10 years, and they're very popular, and we make Megatron, Optimus Prime, and others, and they're all done in carbon fiber shells with exoskeletons. They're about 10 feet tall at the end of the day. Here you see a vacuum bagged carbon fiber finished piece. This piece would probably weigh about less than a pound. And the way you paint it is the way you give it all the trompe l'oeil and the depth. So it looks a mile deep, but it's really a carbon fiber skin. You see the gloss and the flat, really important when you're designing puppetry. Try to keep flat as much as possible because lighting designers like that, but use gloss where you need the hit. Like I said, we make all our own fur. I believe in theatrical use of fabric. So this is a wall of a piece. We just did a Shakespearean piece based on animal puppets, Romeo and Juliet. It's quite a fun show. So all of the animals have fiber hair and skin, and we do a lot with fiber technology. Today's fibers are unbelievable. The lightweight fibers, the polyesters, the printable fabrics, the sculptable fabrics. So we also do costumes and apparel. We're proper dressmakers, but we usually do our craft of, structural costuming. We have a bunch of these little stations of the geeky people that sit around and 3D model. And so now all of our sculptures come from our drawings and our sculpt models, and they go into 3D. And then I keep an office. I love the busyness. I love grinders. I love the sound. So I'm in the top, and I just have such a great relationship. And I still build. I still go out, although mostly I'm on calls like this. And then I think I show you the design area. So we have a successful design department that designs for others. I design a lot of environmental design and scenery that's not puppetry. And for resorts, I really like this idea of providing people fun experience. So I've been designing creatures and interactions in environments such as whether it be theme parks, resorts. Here I'm doing a gazelle on the left, a 9-foot tall gazelle, pretty straightforward, visible puppetry, carbon fiber body. It's for a ceremony in the Middle East. And on the right, we're doing a animatronic tortoise in China that comes out of a cave every 20 minutes and sings popular Chinese songs. It's a tortoise, and we've had great success in the resorts with singing animals. We have a 36-foot wide frog in Las Vegas at the Lake of Dreams. If you look at Lake of Dreams, you can see my animatronic characters they're singing dinner tune. It's dinner show with giant puppets. So that's just, and then composites is really important for me, is the fiberglass and carbon fiber work we do. And I will say, I wouldn't recommend this on an amateur level. You could learn about it, but it's some sexy shit that really works for me. But you should find the go-kart maker or there's people in your community who do carbon fiber and composite mold making. And they're thrilled when a puppet maker comes by and says, starts a conversation. I've had such encouragement from industry because we're doing such an oddball thing. They get very excited. And the next thing you know, the materials engineer shows up at your studio. This is my dance floor, and we have a fly track, lighting system, good audio system. We've had Broadway shows, Cirque du Soleil shows, a lot of really amazing work takes place there. And then shipping and receiving. We're out in Oregon, so everything goes on a truck. And but that's where we have a very safe environment with lots of ventilated spaces, lots of automated equipment, 3D carving, water jet cutting, a lot of 3D printing we use now. And the advantages of technology for a good artist are so good that I would recommend getting familiar with it, whether it's yourself learning how to handle it or finding those collaborators who are good 3D modelers. Once again, use your credentials as a weird artist puppet maker to get them hooked. And then you can talk people into a lot of interesting things. I'm a big fan, as you can tell, about being gregarious about what we do, believing in it enough that the director doesn't call you at the 11th hour, they call you earlier. So it's been a pleasure showing you all this. I think we're going to have questions. Is that it?
Yeah, and Michael, I'm just curious, how big of a team do you have there, and how are most of the folks that work for you been there a long time? Are you always recruiting new talent? Like,
Yes, and yes, and yes. The average employee's been with us 13 years, and we have 60. And so we're really consistent. I spend a lot of time balancing commercial viable jobs with the avant-garde work. For instance, dance companies like Momix, David Parsons Dance. We do a lot of gratis work for them to keep our credentials in the authentic downtown, scene. It's important, but you have to pay the bills. And so occasionally you'll get a project like Disney brought to us with The Lion King, where you get to make the most supreme art, and it happens to be a viable economic opportunity. For that, Tom, I can't tell you. And also, The Lion King, for instance, it was the first time that kind of avant-garde puppetry was ever put forward that way in such a scale. And, I'll credit Julie more than myself, but I'll take some credit. It was really it was a sort of open the floodgates of avant-garde puppetry, or I should say legitimate puppetry in commercial theater. And it's been building ever since. So,
but I do think that was the weird concoction that was The Lion King, that this deeply emotional story that's really it's just a little tiny tale in a sense, right? There's not a lot of plot, but it is so resonant and so global. Everybody owns it. No matter where we've been, and you've been with me all over the world, people relate to it. It's their community. And then you add to it this, if you will, this high art of it, that what you were there and what Julie was doing and you were doing and Richard, everyone is doing this high art with this bizarre thing so that it hit everybody. I mean, the number of fancy people who would call me because they wanted tickets, and the number of people said, I want to bring my grandchildren. And that made this wonderful thing happen. Now it's become just a thing, but in the beginning, it was such a shock for everybody. And I think that's really that was the key to it. But I would also say the key is that the fact that it feels so fully of a cloth, right? It's completely integrated.
Like I said, best collaborative group that I probably will ever experience. So thank you for leading it.
so we're going to jump in to some questions here. So the first question is from Kane, and is asking, what kind of CAD software do you use, Michael? And in using that CAD software, can you preview the animation in there?
Yes, we use a variety of softwares, but it always comes down to what we call a previs. But the CAD is primarily for the engineering, but we use a variety of things from Inventor to, almost any of the sculpting softwares will allow you to, but everything, what's great about today's tools is that you know how you make a puppet and you make a wing, and pretty soon the wing doesn't move very far because it hits this shell, and then I have to cut away that shell. The previs allows you to not have to make those compromises. You get to see all the evidence of the movement and all the repercussions. And it helps us start engineering earlier and helps the sculptors work with the engineers. And so we can actually be faster because we're overlapping. We used to have to make the sculptures. Somebody would get inside of it and start with a measuring tape, then start that process. So to answer your question, AutoCAD is the primary driver of the engineering. And then there's probably 15 softwares we use for previs animation of movement.
Got it.
And that also means the scenic designer can put my puppet into his set design too and see what wall it's going to collide with.
Great. So Courtney from England had a question about what materials would you recommend new puppet makers to use that don't have access to things like carbon fiber?
Hmm. Paper and linen mache. You all know paper mache. It can be quite sophisticated and it can be as light as carbon fiber. Julie was using paper mache when I met her successfully, and then we started changing. There's a variety of aquaplast thermoplastics that can be used, but paper mache is really great. Linen mache, so any fiber can be replaced with the paper pulp, and or together. And then you can go to your auto body store, get some fiberglass cloth and embed it in there and get even more stiffness. And then you might want to look up the technique of monocoquing, COCH. It's a technique whereby you can make thin paper mache stiffer by putting ribs in it. So look, if people use gaffer's tape and duct tape to make extraordinary things at Comic-Con. So I'm a big fan of, we make a very robust product because our shows go forever and ever and they're used so much. So I always go with proper fiberglass, thermoplastics, or carbon fiber. One thing people don't know that when you get on serious stages, you have to be non-flammable. So make sure all your materials are non-flammable, and most people break those rules without knowing it.
And can you think of any unique basic skills that would improve puppet building and making that people don't really think about?
Yes, drawing. I mean, seriously, drawing. Just draw from life, draw from the figure if you've got the courage. Join a life drawing class. It will improve your sense of motion, anatomy, balance, leverage, all the things you know to be a good designer. And the head's connected to the hand that way. It's the easiest thing you can do. And carry the notebook. So this blue one, this is like my 600 one of the same one. It becomes such an important tool. So learn to draw and carry that notebook for ideas. And the other one I would say, if you're a sculptor, sculpt in quick materials. Clay is a beautiful one, just because you can smash it, start over. Styrene and other cheap materials, you carve foam, it's slower. You don't learn as much. So I'm a big fan of additive sculpture when you're first learning. So, and I really like potter's clay, which is the clay that you got to wet and cover with a plastic bag. All of Julie and I's work started in porcelain potter's clay.
Wow, great. Thank you, Michael. So CJ has a question. I think it's interesting. So he says, I was wondering if you have any tips for a college student looking to get into the puppetry industry. And specifically, he says, what would you recommend doing when there's essentially no place to practice puppet building and construction in a school setting?
You got to lobby for it. See what the wood shop is doing, and see what, the theater department would be where you'd want to start. But it takes very little. Some of the most amazing puppet. We go to, Basil's space is like this big, and unbelievable work comes out of there. I would say more than where you go, I'd say what city you're in. I'd urge all of you young people to go to New York or London and find yourself for a couple years there and really plug in. And I can guarantee it'll help. It will help. Either it'll help you decide not to do this, or it'll help you do it. But yeah, like I said, advocate for yourself. So find a space. Maybe is there an engineering department in your school? Is there things that feel like an adjacent kind of form of building?
Yep.
Yeah. Architecture. They must have an architecture department. They build models and they have a table saw in the back.
Karina was asking how you approach designing puppets with an artistic incorporation of the cultures surrounding the show, and how do you begin your research process?
Yeah. I generally start from an art historical manner. That's just me, and the ethnographic concerns come later. I believe if you treat artistry and as an homage, just like I described in The Lion King, it's tougher now. Things are scrutinized and a lot more. Lepage got into a bunch of problems with his Native American shows and things that he was doing pure for artistic and dramatic purposes, but because he was incorporating Native American things, he didn't hire Native American actors. Didn't think about it because there's not a lot of them up there. So he was basically really in trouble over that. So it's an important factor that I didn't used to have to think about as much. But so my solution always would be to let art transcend that. Now, appropriating is really weird because we all do it. I mean, Tamor and I are world citizens. We're borrowing Turkish shadow puppets, Japanese bunraku, African mask building, Inuit carving, and we're doing it kind of under our own roof. So in a way, we've not been, on The Lion King, we got really gracious reviews about our appropriation. And I think it's because we treated the artistry so beautifully.
Well, I just had this conversation through a friend. There's Sabi Asashi, a glorious designer, fashion designer, made some clothes for me for an event there. And I asked him through a mutual friend recently, I said, can I wear these clothes? Is this cultural appropriation? And he said, well, I made it for you. I did it because it's cultural appreciation. And you know the roots of what it is. And you're not wearing some authentic historic garment that is related to all these other things. You're wearing something that I designed. And I think we who travel the world and see the world, as long as you exist in a unit, but if you look at Lion King, we also wouldn't make a move. We had Lebo in the room from day one, right? I had Lebo on the movie with me, Lebo M, who everyone, because in all 32 languages you heard the movie, you heard his call that raises the sun. And that it's not that you bounce through any of these things blindly, but I do think that when you're working in a community, in particular like Lion King, because it is not exclusively African, and even within Africa is a continent in which most of the US and Europe would fit, right? So there's so many different forms as we get to travel it. So I do think, you have to come at it with a certain understanding, and you're right, it is different today as we widen our lens than it was before. Being inclusive requires you to embrace many cultures. And I think that's, essential, but you have to navigate these waters and be wise and thoughtful and have good people with you.
Well, puppetry's always, used as this metaphor for politics too. So it's a special tool, like protest puppetry, not for nothing.
Oh, yeah.
I used to be more political, but I've really turned some heads on political marches and things where you bring a big badass puppet and
oh yeah,
they show up really well. And not just the visual thing, but there's a kind of puppetry makes people look. It just makes you look. And this is why it's a great tool for theater. That's why frankly, I don't do full puppet shows. I generally target puppetry being used as a special moment or a way to deliver a message so emphatically that only puppetry can do it. And it just, psychiatrists use it to talk to children because it can make them listen and look. It's a focus tool. And so it's how you use it is, it has to be sensitive. I don't think people understand puppetry enough to even apply the same rules of acceptable behavior than they would humans. We're expert in humans.
We do allow them.
So expert in puppetry.
We allow puppets to be naughty in a way that humans can't.
Well said.
Also like I like the surprise use of puppetry. I like when something's been in front of the audience for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then you realize it's a puppet because it comes to that. There's a moment of that in Totoro in London that knocked my socks off because I had no idea it was coming. And the wit that you can get from it, and it is commentary too.
Yeah.
So, Michael, this is a question from Ren from New Zealand, and it's actually something you and I recently spoke about, which is, a lot of film, a decade, 2, 3 decades ago was using puppetry in film. and now it moved to CGI. But now we're seeing things like Project Hail Mary, where real puppetry was used, and we're seeing a kind of a lot more puppetry happening on the live stage. Ren is asking, do you think that puppetry is having a new renaissance?
Yes, in a sense, yeah, the Odyssey, and so it is true. God, New Zealand, thank you for joining. And I was going to compliment England on being awake so late, but um, yes, we're always glad to hear that. It's really a ricochet effect. People are a little tired of AI and CG, and so it's a ricochet effect. I knew this would happen, so you're in a good spot, all you practical designers, because it'll never go away. This, as Tom described it, is something you feel the authenticity. So I actually think that there'll be CGI will advance the visual look of CG and AI, which is that's another. We can have another whole discussion about AI, and I can make some my predictions on where that's going. But I don't like what I see in the presentations that I'm in, and it. My only worry about AI is that it will create a substandard criteria for any viewer, that they will lessen their ability for proper criteria to judge aesthetics, story, original thought. So don't over research. Don't Google the subject before you get a chance with this. So my final piece of advice is don't, you may have, all you young makers are seeing way too much stuff. Keep in mind, I had to go to the library and the card catalog to find reference materials if I wanted to see a gazelle. And so I did a lot of those drawings from my head and stuff. And I actually just don't want you to miss out on that. So insofar as like how to be original, and here we're talking about a lot of shows that have IP and things, but at the end of the day, I'd like you all to consider what your original voice and style is and not get it too mixed up with what's been done before.
Michael, Marissa asked a really great question, and I've been asked this, so I have my own opinion on it, which is, when does a puppet stop being a puppet and start being a robot or an automation?
Yeah. Generally, it's thought of when the human hand touches it, and when a substantial portion of it is manipulated or animated by the human performer, dancer, actor hand. When you start having gross body movements pre-programmed, then it starts becoming robotic. We do lots of hybrid. Hybrids are a great thing because I would rather you spend your body gesture and head position than eye blink triggers. So if I could, I'm going to put your eye blink on the soundtrack, and it's going to go exactly where the director wants it every time. And you're going to concentrate on really luscious gestures and body movement, and you won't have a trigger in your hand. So I'm a big fan of blending that way. And that's also where I make the choice of a second puppeteer or not. It's where things start getting to, keep in mind, I'm training actors who've had 3 to 5 weeks with this device. And that's my preference. This is what I'm designing for. I don't get 30-year veterans of the marionette running my thing. So I make them very simple, and I find that the audiences don't really care about the details of how big your handset is and how many strings and triggers are on it. It's really geeky and cool for us, but they don't care.
I think this will be our last question. I think it's a great question to finish up on, and it's to both Michael and Tom, which is, how is the larger Broadway community treating the role of puppet director?
Well, most directors would hate to be called that. Julie just hates to be called a puppet director.
Yeah.
Because it's only a component of what she does. There are a few specialists. Leah Hoffman, who was one of the Warhorse trainers, she's out there with her shingle out as a puppet director. It's not a. What is the role of it today? I think it's a subsidiary of the director and choreographer and the scenic designer.
And as the Brits would say, I do think it's horses for courses. When you look at what Marianne did Elliot did with Warhorse, which was, yeah, the opening 10 minutes. It was glorious, and then I was like, okay, but it's spectacular, right? And then you need those brilliant handspring people to be there all the time. And then there's shows where like Lion King, where it becomes, as much a part of the resident director as it is there's a puppet department that's maintaining and teaching basic things. I do think each show has different requirements, and it's what you're asking the puppet to do. It bothers me when I see it not done well, but I don't know that there's a recipe for this. I have this thing that I quote all the time, which is the recipe for success is the formula for failure. You have to, every time you approach something, say, how am I going to do this? What's going to serve? Because it always has to come down to serving the narrative, and within the narrative be tied to the visual world, and otherwise, why, what's its point for being there? I do see occasionally, I just saw something where, okay, there's a cute moment, and I don't think the audience even perceives it's puppets, but it's just something that gets a laugh for a minute, and that's so basic. And then there's things that are so delicate, like I mentioned Totoro. There's no show without those puppets. It's a big old puppet on that stage, and a curious thing in a way that I couldn't even imagine. And then you would probably treat that differently than something else.
Yeah, I guess there's really not that many complete puppetry-focused pieces on Broadway to really consider that would there be specialized directors. I love that idea. I want to meet that person.
That is you, Michael. You direct your own shows.
What I think is important to say is that designers have to follow through with the choreographers and the director and finish their work. And so Tom mentioned sometimes it's just not done very well on stage. It's because nobody knows what to do. And so the designer really has to complete the thought. And you need to become nimble as a director of movement and animation, because you remember that image you have at the beginning of your project? You need to make sure that's articulated.
Great. Well, that brings us to 6 o'clock, and I want to thank everyone from around the world, which is incredible. It's amazing to see so many people joining us from different parts of the world. So thank you. I want to especially thank Michael and Tom for being a part of this discussion today. I know I learned a lot, and hopefully everyone else did as well. And lastly, I want to thank the Museum of Broadway for co-hosting this panel with us, and for sponsoring the Craft of Broadway Puppetry exhibit. And if you haven't seen it, as I said, it's going to be up officially through the end of October, but I believe through the end of December, and hope you can make it. So thank you for joining us today, and really appreciate it.
Michael, so great to see you.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Darin, if there were any questions you felt that went unanswered that I should answer, send them on and I'll answer it.
Great. Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.